He was a king who ruled with mercy. They called him weak. He was betrayed by blood, by love, and by the people he swore to protect. But he did not die. He became something else. Not a king. Not yet. This is the tale of a crown, stolen, a soul broken, and a man who will return not to rule, but to bring justice. This is the betrayer's crown. Welcome to Scrolls of Power, where forgotten legends are reborn, where revenge walks hand in hand with justice, where crowns do not make kings' choices do. Tonight we begin our most human tale yet. His name was Thorian Valen. At 27, he was the youngest ruler in Velmoran history, a king who never sought the crown but accepted it when war tore the old world apart. He ended that war not with fire, but with forgiveness. He disbanded the blood courts, freed debt slaves, opened the palace to commoners. They called his reign the Gentle Five. Some adored him. Others waited for him to stumble, because mercy in the world of kings is a crown made of glass. The scent of myrrh and honey wine drifted through the vaulted halls of Valabridge Keep. Outside the city of Velmoris pulsed with celebration. Drums rolled like distant thunder. Bells sang from tower to tower. Children wore painted wooden crowns, shouting verses they barely understood. 5 years of peace. 5 years without war. 5 years under the reign of a man who once knelt before prisoners instead of condemning them. Inside the grand hall, the king stood among them, not above. Thorian Valen wore no crown tonight. No sword, no armor. Only a tunic of deep blue velvet embroidered at the collar with the golden branch of House Valen. His sleeves were rolled just slightly as though prepared to pour wine himself if needed. He moved among the nobles and merchants and scholars like a current between stones, quiet, constant, unwavering. A child approached him with a gift, a ribbon sewn with ivy and paper lilies. Thorian bent to receive it not with royal pomp, but with genuine warmth. "You made this yourself?" he asked. The girl nodded, eyes wide. "Then it's worth more than any jewel in this hall." He tied the ribbon to his wrist. The crowd watched with admiration. Some smiled. Others watched with calculation. At the edge of the dais, dressed in emerald and silver, Serenia 9 tilted her head ever so slightly. Her hair was braided back from her face, coiled like a crown. Around her wrist, hidden beneath the sleeve, a slender loop of iron gleamed where gold should have been. She watched Thorian. The way he laughed, the way he never seemed to dominate a room, only belonged to it. And somewhere in her gaze, love had faded. Not into hatred, but into something colder. Purpose. Across the hall, Thorian Valen, the king's younger brother, leaned against a marble pillar, sipping from a tall goblet. His tunic bore the sigil of House Valen, but in black and crimson, not gold. His face held the same noble features as his brother, but harder, sharper. Where Thorian's voice soothed Aaron's sliced, he caught Serenia's gaze. She nodded. Barely. It was enough. Outside the great hall in the guard tower above the western wing, Captain Neros Dren tightened the leather straps on his gauntlets. His soldiers' 12 hand-picked blades sworn not to the crown, but to Aaron stood in silence, waiting. The signal would come with the toll of midnight. Until then they were ghosts. Neros checked his blade twice. He wasn't nervous. He was ready. Inside the celebration swelled. Musicians struck up a new hymn. Old nobles clapped in rhythm they didn't understand. Diplomats from southern provinces exchanged false compliments. Toasts were made, goblets raised. And from the high gallery above the throne, behind a tapestry depicting the founding of the kingdom, Cale Vane crouched in silence. He'd once been a thief, a pickpocket, a shadow. Now he was Thorian's spy, his eyes in a court that had grown too quiet in its praise. Cale saw the nods, the stilled hands, the servants moving just slightly off pace. He knew the signs. He had seen revolutions before, just never from the center of one. The bell above Valabridge tolled once, then again, then a third time. Midnight. The doors of the throne hall burst open, not with ceremony but with boots. Captain Neros entered first, helmet tucked beneath one arm, sword drawn and lowered. Behind him, the 12 guards fanned out like a silent wave. The music halted. A wineglass shattered. A noblewoman gasped. Thorian turned confused but not alarmed. "Captain," he said evenly, "this is not part of the procession." Neros bowed his head slightly. "No, your grace. It's not." Thorian's eyes narrowed. He turned to Aaron. His brother stepped forward. And in that moment, before he spoke, before any steel was raised, Thorian already knew. Aaron's voice was steady. "You were never meant to keep it, brother." The silence in the hall broke like ice. Screams. Steel. A servant shoved aside a table, crashing wine and fruit to the floor. Thorian stepped back, searching instinctively for his sword. There was none. He'd left it behind by choice. A gesture of peace, of trust, and now it was his curse. Thorian didn't move. He stood among the chaos unarmed, his gaze locked on Aaron not with fear but with a deep shattering disappointment. "You would do this," he said in front of them all. In front of everyone, Aaron replied. "That's the point." Thorian took a slow step forward. "We can talk." No, Serenya's voice cut across the hall like frost. That time passed Thorian. She walked toward him, calm, graceful, every step deliberate. Her voice was soft enough that only he could hear it. "You chose hope over change. You chose words over action. And now, this is action." She leaned in, kissed his cheek, and whispered, "Good kings die gently." Then she turned away. Captain Nyros raised his blade. "Take him." A table crashed as Thorian shoved it aside, grabbing a serving platter to deflect the first blow. Silver rang against steel. He ducked, turned, grabbed a fallen wine jug, hurled it into a guard's face, then sprinted toward the west exit. "Seal the hall," Nyros shouted. "No one leaves." The guards moved, but Kale was already there, bursting through a servant's entrance with a short dagger drawn. "Left," Kale shouted. "Back kitchens." Thorian didn't argue. They sprinted through a narrow corridor, past barrels of spiced wine and shelves of hanging herbs. Boots thundered behind them. "There's a gate in the lower cellars," Kale called. "Built for fire drills. Then let's hope it still opens." They crashed through a rusted iron door, down a spiraling stone stair into pitch blackness. Behind them, torches drew nearer. Kale stopped at a dead wall, feeling along the edges. Come on, come on." A soft click. Stone shifted. The wall groaned as a panel slid aside, revealing a tunnel carved into the earth, long abandoned, thick with damp moss. They ducked in just as the guards reached the stair. Kale yanked the door shut behind them. Silence. Darkness. Then Thorian exhaled his voice, shaking not from fear but from fury. "You knew." Kale didn't look at him. "I suspected. That's why I stayed close." Thorian leaned against the wall, the weight of betrayal pressing harder than the stone around them. "They'll turn the people against me," he said. "They already have." They moved through the tunnel in silence. Hours passed, their feet soaked through with mud and rat droppings. The air grew colder, thinner. At dawn, they emerged on the outskirts of the city through a concealed hatch beneath an abandoned root cellar. The wind was sharp, the sky pale. Thorian pulled his cloak tighter. Behind him, Velmoris rose on the hill, majestic and distant, but the light that shone from its towers now felt foreign. Not warm, not welcoming. "I built peace," he said softly. "I gave them hope." Kale looked at him. "You gave them what they weren't ready for." They turned west toward the unknown, toward the exile, not of body, but of soul. They slept in an abandoned watchtower the first night. Kale stood guard while Thorian rested, or tried to. Sleep didn't come easy, not with the weight of betrayal pressing down on every breath. He saw Aaron's face. Serenya's voice rang in his ears. Mercy doesn't work. No matter how often he blinked, the memory wouldn't leave him. By morning, the fire had died and the road ahead led only west, toward Wormwood. The forest rose like a jagged wall in the distance, its canopy thick and wild, untouched by axe or fire for generations. Birds did not fly over it. No path cut through it. People spoke its name only in warnings. But Thorian didn't hesitate. He walked into the mist. The trees swallowed them whole. Sound changed in Wormwood. It didn't echo. It absorbed. The deeper they moved, the less Kale spoke. Thorian felt it too, a pressure not of air, but of presence. It was like walking into a cathedral with no roof, no gods, only roots and time. Hours passed. Then a voice, not loud, not near, but clear. "You seek shelter." Thorian turned startled. A woman stood among the trees, cloaked in feathers and moss, her silver hair tied with bone clasps. Her staff shimmered faintly, though no sun touched it. Her eyes were deep and still. "Who are you?" Thorian asked. "Era Thorn," she said. "Warden of this forest." He bowed his head slightly. "I'm not here to rule, no. You're here to remember who you are." She led them to a grove where the trees parted, forming a circle of stone and root. A pool sat at its center, still and black. They rested, ate a little, spoke less. Era watched, not with judgment, but with patience. On the second night, she approached Thorian as he sat beside the pool. "Do you know why they betrayed you?" He looked up, tired. "Because I was weak." She shook her head. "Because you believed they wanted what you wanted." He stared at the water. "What do they want then?" "Safety," she said, "even if it means chains." He didn't speak. "You gave them wings. They feared the sky." She trained him not with blades, but with questions. Not with commands, but with silence. Each day Thorian rose before dawn, drew water from the stream, learned to track deer without disturbing moss, fought not with sword, but with breath. Kale watched, half amused, half concerned. "You're becoming one of them," he said one night. "No," Thorian replied. "I'm becoming less of who I was." Kale sipped his flask. "Is that a good thing?" Thorian looked into the flames. "I think it's the only way I'll survive what's coming." One morning, Era gave him a task. She handed him a stone, smooth, black, warm to the touch. "Take it to the tree that no longer lives," she said. "If it returns warm, you are ready." He didn't ask what it meant. He just walked. It took him 2 days to find the tree, split by lightning, hollow in the heart, but still standing. He placed the stone in its trunk and waited. Night fell. The stars watched. In the stillness, Thorian wept not for his throne, but for the part of him that still wanted it. When he returned, the stone was glowing, and Era said nothing. She simply nodded. "You may go." They left Wormwood under clouded skies. No words were spoken between Thorian and Era, but the silence carried meaning. Kale waited at the tree line, sharpening his dagger with a rock far too blunt to matter. When Thorian stepped out of the woods, Kale whistled low. "You look like someone who buried a god." "I buried something," Thorian said. They traveled northeast, following the spine of the old kingdom. Villages came into view, familiar in structure, foreign in spirit. The people were thinner, the guards thicker. Every square had new banners, emerald and silver, the mark of Serenia. In one town they saw a man beaten for speaking of the old king. In another they passed children forced into drills, wooden swords and hand-eyes hollow. Thorian said nothing, but his hands clenched tighter each day. In a tavern by the border of Eastvale they sat in the corner, cloaked and silent. A barmaid approached. Older, worn, her gaze locked with Thorian's for half a second too long. She dropped the tray. "You..." The room stilled. Kale stood quickly. "He's no one." But the woman's voice broke with disbelief and rage. "You're the king, the one who ran? My husband died in that hall while you disappeared like smoke." Thorian stood slowly. "I didn't run," he said quietly. "You didn't stay," she spat. He looked down. There was no defense, only truth. "I'm sorry." Her hands shook. "Sorry won't bring back the dead." She turned, leaving him standing there with silence as his only crown. They left before dawn. No goodbyes, only ghosts. As they walked, Kale glanced at him. "Still think this ends with forgiveness?" Thorian's voice was flat. "I'm not looking for forgiveness." Kale raised an eyebrow. "Then what?" "Balance." That night, as they camped beneath the ruins of an old watchtower, Thorian looked to the stars, and for the first time he didn't wish for power. He wished for clarity, because he finally understood. The kingdom didn't fall when Eren took the throne. It had been falling long before. He just hadn't seen it. They returned to Velmoras on foot. No banners, no horns, no crowd. Just dust on their boots and silence in their mouths. The city gates were different now, guarded not by royal sentries in gold, but soldiers in dark lacquered armor bearing Serenia's vine sigil. Faces blank, eyes hollow, obedient not loyal. Kale led the way through the merchant's quarter. "We stay to the shadows, speak to no one who remembers, and don't look up." Thorian nodded. He followed, not as a king but as a shadow. The city pulsed with strange rhythm. The music was gone. No street performers, no singing vendors. Just soldiers marching, merchants whispering, children watching with eyes too old. Velmoris had not fallen. It had calcified. Fear made statues of them all. At the edge of a market square, Thorian watched as a man was dragged into a public cage. A sign was nailed above his head, spoke against the vine. A woman begged the guards he only asked about bread prices. A baton answered her plea. Thorian turned away, not because he was afraid, but because if he didn't look away, he might act. And he couldn't afford that. Not yet. They took refuge in the slums of Eastvale, where the shadows ran deeper and memories ran longer. Thorian wore a hood low, carried water, helped rebuild a collapsed roof for an old woman who never asked his name. At night he listened. He heard of tax hikes, disappearances, books banned, trials without judges, 1,000 cuts hidden beneath velvet decrees, and everywhere he turned he saw her sigil, Serenya's vine, not Aaron's. It became clear. She ruled, he obeyed. Kale reconnected with old contacts, tavern keepers, street performers, former palace pages. A network began to form, quiet, careful. They called it the Hollow Flame. Not a rebellion. Not yet. A whisper. A reminder. That fire could still catch. One night in a basement beneath a butcher's shop, Thorian stood before 10 figures cloaked in shadow masons. Teachers, soldiers without armor. No titles. No thrones. Only eyes that asked, "What do you want from us?" And Thorian answered, "Not your swords. Not your loyalty. Only your truth. I want to know what this kingdom has become, not from scrolls or spies. From you. Because if we ever rise, it will be because you chose to stand, not because I returned." In the highest tower of Valabridge Keep, Serenya 9 stood before a mirror. She wore no crown. She never needed one. Her fingers traced the edges of a dispatch. Another food riot suppressed another village requesting mercy. Another whisper that he had been seen. Thorian. She did not panic. Serenya never panicked, but her silence grew longer between breaths. Across the room, Thorian Valen paced, boots echoing over the marble. He was thinner than before, paler. Sleep rarely found him. "I want him found," he snapped. "If he's in the city..." "He is," Serenya said calmly. Aaron stopped. "You knew." She turned to him, eyes like glass. "I know everything in this city, including how little they fear you." His jaw tightened. "They still kneel." "No," she replied. "They bow. Not the same." Elsewhere in the keep, Captain Nyros trained a fresh wave of palace guards. He struck fast, brutal, efficient, but even he couldn't ignore the rumors. The Hollow Flame, the Shadow King, the man in blue who helped fix broken windows and vanished before morning. He spoke to Serenya in private. "Give me the name and I'll put his head on your table." Serenya shook her head. "We don't kill ghosts. We suffocate them." She summoned new laws, closed taverns past sundown, doubled patrols. And yet the whispers spread faster, because now the people didn't just remember Thorian. They missed him. Meanwhile, Thorian sat in a candlelit room with 3 children and an old mason. The boy read a poem aloud, a banned piece written during Thorian's reign. It spoke of mercy not as weakness, but as fire restrained. Thorian listened, not as a king, but as a student. "You wrote that the mason asked after..." Thorian shook his head. "I only asked the poet not to burn." The room fell quiet. Then the boy said, "My father says the new king doesn't read anything." Kale chuckled. "That's because reading makes you ask questions, and questions burn faster than books." That night in the catacombs beneath the old cathedral, the hollow flame grew. 5 became 12. 12 became 30. Thorian remained unnamed. He wore no crest, gave no orders. But they listened to him not because he commanded, but because he understood. One day a woman who had lost her son to Aaron's press gangs asked him, "When do we strike?" Thorian's answer was quiet. "When the kingdom is ready to rise, not for me, not for a crown, but for itself." The obsidian hall had never held so many guards. Scribes whispered. Courtiers fidgeted. Even the banners seemed tense, hanging heavier than usual. Word had spread that a royal edict was to be read, one not made in war rooms but in judgment. At the high dais, Aaron sat in the seat once carved for kings. But he didn't look like one. His hands clenched the arms of the throne. His eyes darted to the left, where Serenia stood flanked by high ministers and dressed in cold silver. She held the decree, written in her hand, signed by Aaron's seal, and it read only one thing. Thorian Valen, stripped of title, named traitor to the realm, wanted dead or alive, to be executed on sight. The room fell into silence. Aaron's mouth was dry. He hadn't written the words. He hadn't even spoken them. But now the kingdom would hear them as his. A nobleman stepped forward. "Does His Majesty confirm this order?" Aaron hesitated, a beat too long. Then Serenia's gaze found him calm, expectant, iron behind her smile. "Yes," Aaron said at last. "Let it be done." And just like that, the kingdom turned a page. The boy who had once followed his brother to the battlefield had now condemned that brother to death. The stain would never wash out, not even in blood. The edict spread like fire. Posters nailed to every post. Heralds shouting in the streets. Thorian Valen, traitor king. But something strange happened. Wherever the ink landed, so did chalk. Small symbols appeared below the posters, barely noticeable unless you looked. A single flame, drawn in white, the mark of the hollow. Even in silence, they pushed back. In a bakery in the Westgate district, Thorian read the poster himself. He didn't flinch. Kale beside him hissed through his teeth. "They're getting desperate. They're consolidating," Thorian said. "Trying to make me the enemy they need. And is it working?" Thorian tore the poster down, folded it once, placed it in his cloak. Not on the ones who matter. Across the street, a boy no older than 10 mimed tearing his own poster down, then smiled at Thorian and ran. Back in the palace, cracks began to form. Aaron drank more, spoke less. He snapped at ministers, avoided court, and began holding meetings in private chambers where no one could hear him think. He dreamed of Thorian at night, standing in the corner of his room, saying nothing, just watching. Serenia noticed. She moved the chess pieces quietly, replacing his guards with her own, assigning loyal clerks to shadow his advisors. She didn't need Aaron strong, only obedient. But the stronger she made the cage, the more the lion inside it stirred. It was meant to be a routine arrest. A boy barely 16 caught stealing grain from the market carts. 3 guards had cornered him in an alley, laughing as they shoved him to the ground. His lip bled. His voice trembled. He swore he was hungry, that it was only for his sister. But the law didn't bend for hunger. Not anymore. One guard raised his baton. The others didn't stop him. They didn't have to, because someone else did. A figure stepped from the shadows, cloaked, hooded, unarmed. The guard turned. "Back away. This is royal law." The figure didn't move. "You're outnumbered," the guard warned. "Then bring more," the voice answered. Calm, low, familiar, too familiar. The baton fell, but it never landed. The figure moved with precision, not brutality, but efficiency. One twist and the weapon clattered to the ground. One shove and the second guard slammed into the wall. The third reached for his horn. Too slow. When it ended, no one was dead, but 3 trained soldiers lay groaning in the dust. And the boy was free. "Who are you?" the boy whispered. The figure didn't answer. He pressed a pouch of coin into the boy's hand. "Go, feed your sister." Then he vanished. But the boy didn't run far. He told someone, and that someone told a baker, who told a teacher, who whispered it to a smuggler. And within 2 days, the city spoke of nothing else. A man in blue, unarmed, silent, merciful. They say it was him. Serenia heard the rumor in her council chambers. A scroll delivered by trembling hands. She read it twice, then smiled. Not with joy, with calculation. "This," she said, "is how it begins." Aaron didn't answer. He hadn't spoken in hours. She didn't mind. He had served his purpose. Now the war of shadows could begin. In the hollow flame's growing ranks, the whispers took fire. Not rage, hope. Thorian never claimed the act. He didn't need to. He only met with his people in the dark behind closed doors and said, "We don't win by burning down what's broken. We win by lighting the way back to what's worth saving." And so they moved, quietly, spreading supplies to hungry districts, passing banned books under crates of spice, tending to wounds no healer dared touch. They weren't soldiers, not yet, But they were becoming something far more dangerous to tyrants. A memory made real. They called it the Purge of Names. On the surface, it was just a census, a security measure, a routine act of the crown. But everyone knew better. Guards knocked on doors at dawn. Do you know anyone who speaks of the hollow flame? Have you seen anyone carrying the band crest? Do you remember the name Thorian Valen? Silence became currency. Betrayal survival. Neighbors whispered against each other. A father turned in his own son. A baker accused her apprentice just to save her stall. Vilmoras bled. Not from wounds, but from within. In the heart of Eastvale, a woman was dragged into the square, accused of sheltering a known sympathizer. The crowd gathered not to cheer, not even to protest. They came to watch, because watching was all they were allowed to do. The guards read the charges aloud. She is guilty of conspiracy against the crown. She will be made example of. The woman shook, but she did not cry. She raised her chin. If justice lives, she said, then this moment is not the end. The captain scoffed. No, it's just the middle. He raised his blade, but he never brought it down, because someone shouted from the crowd. Stand down. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The guards turned. A man stepped forward, not hooded, not hidden. He wore old armor, patched and dulled, marked with the faded crest of House Valen. His voice was cracked with age, but iron still lined it. Captain Halden, one of the guards, whispered. He's supposed to be dead. He wasn't. Lord Varric Halden, Thorian's former arms master. The blade of the crown. I watched that woman feed soldiers during the famine, Varric said. She saved lives while the palace measured tax quotas. The captain stepped forward. She defied the crown. She honored the kingdom. The captain raised his blade. So did I, Varric growled. And in one motion he drew his sword. It sang, the kind of sound only made by steel that remembers war. No blood was spilled, because the captain didn't dare fight him. He lowered his sword. The guards hesitated, then stepped back. The crowd said nothing, but their silence was different now. Not fear, reverence. Varric turned, faced the people, and said one thing. He lives, and I will follow him again, not because he was king, but because he never forgot how to be human. Then he walked away, not chased, not stopped, just watched, as if a ghost had given them permission to breathe again. News of the confrontation reached the palace before nightfall. Serenia crushed a wineglass in her hand. Aaron stared at the flames in the hearth, unmoving. He whispered almost to himself, the crown is slipping. No, Serenia said, voice taut. It's being tested. But even she had to admit, shadows don't bleed, but they do grow. The meeting was arranged in secret. No guards, no allies, no blades. Just two brothers cloaked in shadow standing beneath the ruins of the old aqueduct where they once raced as boys. Thorian arrived first. He stood with his back to the moonlight, listening to the river that no longer flowed. Aaron came late. He looked older than before, not in face but in posture, like a man carrying stones no one else could see. For a moment they said nothing. Then Aaron broke the silence. I didn't want it to be this way. You signed the edict, Thorian said. I had to. You always had a choice. Aaron laughed, bitter and quiet. No, you had a choice. You were the one they loved, the one who could speak and the people listened. I was just your shadow. You could have stood beside me. I did, and no one saw me. A long silence. Then Thorian spoke. I never wanted you small, Aaron. Then why did I always feel it? Aaron stepped closer. You need to leave, he said. Take your followers. Go beyond the borders. Disappear. I'll call off the search. Just stop. Thorian looked at him for a long time, and in his brother's eyes he saw not a tyrant. He saw a prisoner. Not of chains, but of shame. You're not afraid of me, Thorian said. You're afraid of what I remind you of. Aaron didn't deny it. I didn't know what she would become, Aaron muttered. Serenia. He nodded. She promised structure. Order. She said the kingdom needed teeth. And now, Thorian asked. Aaron's voice cracked. Now I can't tell if I'm a king or just a seal on her letters. Thorian stepped closer. You can still choose. I can't, Aaron whispered. She holds everything. No. She only holds what you refuse to fight for. Aaron turned to leave. But before he vanished into the shadows, he said one last thing. I'll delay her next move. That's all I can do. And then he was gone. Thorian stood alone beneath the broken arch, not triumphant, not comforted, but clear. For years he thought reclaiming the kingdom meant restoring himself. Now he knew it meant letting go of who he was, and becoming what the kingdom needed. No more hiding, no more symbols, only fire, but not to burn, to light the way. It was meant to be a warning. A trial held in the central square. A merchant accused of aiding rebels caught selling food to a hollow flame sympathizer. He was old, tired, his only crime refusing to starve a hungry child. Serenya's new magistrates made a spectacle of it. Soldiers lining the streets, citizens forced to watch, a gallows raised before the verdict was even read. Let them see what mercy brings, one minister whispered. They did, but not what the crown expected. Because as the rope was tightened, a voice rang out from the crowd. Let him speak. All heads turned. A hooded man stepped forward. No armor, no weapon, just a presence steady, unblinking. The magistrate barked, "This is a restricted," but the crowd had already parted. The hood dropped. Gasps, silence, then murmurs, "It's him, the king. No, he's dead. No, he just stopped kneeling." The guards hesitated. No one moved, not even the magistrate. Thorian climbed the steps. He stood beside the old merchant and said without raising his voice, "If feeding the hungry is treason, then this kingdom no longer deserves its throne." The crowd didn't erupt. They breathed, as if they had been holding it for 5 long years. The magistrate stammered, "You are a wanted." Thorian turned to him. "I am nothing. No title, no crown, just a man who remembers what we were." Then he faced the people. "If you do too, then start acting like it." He cut the rope with his own hand and walked down the steps. No guards followed. No arrows flew, because something had changed. Not in law, not in banners, but in hearts, and that is where kingdoms are truly made. Serenia received word within the hour. She stared at the message in silence. "Should we send the blackguard?" Nyros asked. She didn't answer. She simply walked to the window and looked down at the city. Velmora's pulsed differently now. Not with fire, but with warmth, she whispered to herself. So he finally chose. Then she turned and began writing her final play, because she knew something Thorian had not yet realized. Hope could rally a crowd, but only fear could control it. They called it the Day of Remembrance, a public holiday, a ceremony to honor the lives lost in the Civil War. The very one that had ended with Thorian's rise and later his fall. Statues were draped, flowers laid, banners raised, but not the golden branches of House Valen, only vines, emerald and silver, the mark of Serenia. She stood atop the marble steps of the temple square, flanked by ministers, generals, and a silent Aaron whose eyes never once met the crowd. "We are gathered," she declared, "not to celebrate rulers, but to remember what unity costs." It was poetic, it was hollow, and it was bait. The hollow flame knew it. Kale knew it. "This is a trap," he said. "Every archer in the city will be on those rooftops. Every escape route will be choked." Thorian sat in silence, the candlelight flickering across his face. "She wants me to come." "Then don't." Thorian looked at him, and in his eyes was no fear, no ego, only conviction. "If I don't, she wins by default." Kale swore under his breath. "There's brave, and there's stupid." Thorian stood. "I was a king once, then a ghost. Now, I need to be a man who finishes what he started." When he stepped into Temple Square, time stopped. Not because of magic, but because every eye turned. Some recognized him instantly. Others only saw a memory long buried. A whisper passed from mouth to mouth faster than any royal decree. "He came." Serenia watched from above. A small, satisfied smile touched her lips. She gestured subtly. Archers lifted bows hidden in shadows. Blades moved into position. But Thorian kept walking, step by step. He reached the center of the square, beneath the statue of the first king. Then he spoke. No scroll, no title, only truth. "I was taught that peace is a throne built on compromise. But I learned too late that compromise without justice is just a quieter form of tyranny. I'm not here to take back a crown. I'm here to give you back your voice. The crowd didn't cheer. They leaned in. Serenia gave the signal. A sharp nod. One archer loosed a whistle. But before the arrow struck, someone stepped in front of Thorian. A guard, not Kale, not a rebel. One of hers. The arrow struck his armor and fell. He turned, faced the rooftop, and shouted, "We protect the people, not the throne." The crowd surged, not in riot. In defense, they moved to shield Thorian. A ripple of resistance formed, not led but shared. The archers froze. The generals hesitated. Aaron, watching from beside Serenia, finally stood. He looked at the chaos, then looked at her, and for the first time said no. Aloud, "I won't be your puppet anymore." Serenia's face didn't move, but her world cracked, because the throne she stole now had no king to hold it. Temple Square stood still, not with fear, but with reckoning. The moment Serenia stepped back from the ledge, the archers lowered their bows, not by command, by instinct, because the tide had turned not with fire, not with blood, but with choice. Aaron stepped forward. He stood beside Thorian, not tall, not proud, just human. He looked at the crowd and spoke 3 words. "I release it." Silence. Then confusion. Release what someone called. Aaron took the crown from his belt, held it high, then dropped it to the stone floor. It rang once, then rolled uneven, uncertain, until it stopped at Thorian's feet. Thorian stared at it. Long, hard. He bent down, picked it up, not to wear, but to return. He turned to the crowd, to Aaron, to everyone. "No crown," he said, "will ever rule this kingdom again. From this day forward, Velmoris will be led not by bloodline, but by voice. A council of chosen hands, of memory, of mercy. I will not be your king, but I will always be your shield." No cheers, just stillness. Then the oldest woman in the crowd stepped forward, placed her hand over her heart, and bowed. Then another, and another, until the entire square stood bowed in silence. Not to a crown, to a man who refused to wear one. Serenia was taken without struggle. She said nothing, only stared into the distance as if searching for the future she'd tried to carve. Aaron vanished from the city within days. Some say he went north. Others say he walked into the woods and never came back. No monuments were built, no songs written, only a plaque, set in the stone beneath the old statue. Justice returned not with swords but with memory, and the fire that burns most brightly is the one we pass to others. Some crowns are taken, others given, but the most powerful are the ones refused, because in the end a kingdom is not its throne, it's its people, its truth. Its choice to remember who it once was and to rise not for vengeance but for something better. And this was the betrayer's crown. If this tale stirred something in you, a sense of justice, a whisper of fire, a memory worth keeping, then help us carry it further. Like, share, and subscribe to Scrolls of Power, where legends rise not because they seek thrones, but because they carry truth. Until the next tale, stand tall, and never kneel to fear.